nice, awesome Tomahawks and Dirks, Ravensbeak Forge. Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria. So I want to give a little shout out and recommendation to Ravensbeak Forge, based over in Canada. And Ethan there has sent me various things over the years. We'll look at this Dirk in a second, which have enabled me, and you should be grateful to him as well, because they've enabled me to make a whole bunch of videos. So it started out really with the Tomahawk, okay? And so he specializes in a lot of, should we say, North American centric edged weapons, including Native American weapons, also kind of European settler in North America weapons, we'll look at in a second, and also Highland Scottish weapons. So the main thing that he kind of started out with, and I think became really well known, at least as far as I knew, was Tomahawks. Now that's really, really cool, because I have loved Native American weapons my entire life, going all the way back to when I used to build a teepee in my garden with my bow, and watch lots of associated movies, and Last of the Mohicans and things like that. I absolutely love this type of stuff. So Tomahawks, I've talked about in the past, they start out originally actually with, for anyone who hasn't watched my associated videos, with things like this. Essentially, obviously, the Native Americans had access to a little bit of copper, but by and large their weapons were made of stone, wood, horn, bone, things like this. So things like this American Plains Indian stone-headed club, probably Sioux, which actually they were prevalent all over North America. And Mesoamerica as well, actually. Various types. There's bull-headed clubs. The gunstock clubs don't really come about probably until the Europeans turn up, but stone-headed clubs and various other types of really, really cool organic material weapons. But as soon as the Europeans turn up, they come with things like hatchets and iron to trade. And so we very quickly get these sorts of frontier axes. Now, it should be pointed out, much like this frontier axe here, also made by Ravensbeak Forge, that they were carried by European settlers and traders and trappers and all of this kind of thing. So these weapons, at least at the beginning, weren't at all uniquely Native American, but obviously they were traded with the Native Americans and developed their own forms. So this is pretty much typical, and this is by Ravensbeak Forge, really nice forged eye on it there, with a sort of teardrop shape hardwood shaft, which helps align the edge. These sorts of axe were carried by numerous types of settlers, even soldiers as well. And bear in mind that a lot of militias and stuff in North America when they were first settling didn't necessarily have access to a lot of resources. There wasn't a lot of money going around. So they didn't have like hangers or swords or stuff. They made do with these as a hand weapon and a knife. And obviously those things were traded with Native Americans, some of whom were friends and allies and people they traded with, and some of whom were enemies because they were moving into territory where they got into territorial disputes. And of course there were existing intertribal rivalries, and very famously, for example, the Huron sided with the French, and the Mohawk Iroquois more or less sided with the British, and so that introduced that kind of, you know, European war was introduced into the North Americas. Anyway, enough of the history and the politics, and more about the weapons. So these sorts of axes were carried by Europeans, but of course they then became very prevalent amongst Native Americans, because if you have a culture of carrying things like this, and suddenly something like this comes along, you're like, well, yeah, that's great. It's got a harder edge on it and I can use it in pretty much exactly the same way. One thing I just want to mention, and I have dealt with this in a previous video reading lots of original sources, look up my previous videos on Tomahawks, these were also thrown. Now, Native Americans had, many tribes anyway, had a tradition of throwing weapons. And while the tomahawk like this didn't exist until the Europeans turned up, they did of course have weapons like this. And if you've got a living tradition of throwing these things, then you can very easily adapt it to throwing these things, and it becomes even more dangerous, arguably. So they not only used these as hand weapons together with a knife, we'll talk about that in a second, but they did also use them as thrown weapons, especially when they had another weapon as a backup, like a knife. And on that topic, Ravensbeak Forge also makes things like these trade blade knives as used by Native Americans and also settlers as well. It's got a really nice cool bone handle. Good steel blade, very sharp edge, and does really, really nice leather work as well. And that brings us on, just before I go on to the knives actually, also other types of tomahawk. This is a smokable one. I don't smoke anymore. Did used to smoke when in my younger years, but I don't smoke anymore. But if I had to smoke the peace pipe, then I would. But I don't have to at the moment. I'm not at war with anyone. So I don't need to bury the hatchet yet. I love all of these expressions that come from this. But this is a Spontoon hawk. So that's another one made by Ethan over there at Ravensbeak Forge. Lovely, lovely. This is one of my absolute favourites, and really, really nice pattern to the wood. It's amazing that it's got a functional pipe as well, and I just love the fact that it's like a war pick essentially. So again, as soon as they had access to metal, they started buying in these really cool funky designs that are really instantly recognizable as North American, Indian. And although many of these were made by the British and the French and the Spanish and the others, they ended up being customized, and very often they decorate the shafts in a way similar to this with beads and all this kind of stuff. And of course that happens with the knives. So back to the knives. Now the other thing that Ethan does, and something that also would have been found in North America, both Canada and what's now the United States at that time, are other European weapons, which sometimes would have been in the hands of settlers, sometimes would have been raided, traded, bought, given to Native Americans as well, like this Highland Dirks. So I just put it in its scabbard so you can see the full thing. So that's the other thing Ethan's really well known for, are Highland things. Highland knives, dirks, skin-do, things like this. And this is one that he made for me, in fact, fairly recently. It took me a while to ship it in because of shipping problems. That's another story. But this is essentially modelled on a, I think, early 18th century style of dirk. So it's got this really cool decoration, writhen sort of decoration with the brass studs in here, and a fairly typical actually dirk blade. There are different types of dirk blade, and yes indeed, I know some people are asking in the comments, dirk blades sometimes are made from cut down sword blades or broken sword blades, but most dirks are made as dirk blades. Okay, so this type of dirk, still in fact basically this design, or at least similar derivative design based on this, still being carried in the British Army today for parade purposes amongst Highland regiments, and they're obviously still a part of traditional Highland dress. And in fact, a weird quirk of British UK law, England and Wales law, is that you can still wear dirks and skin-do if you're in Highland dress at the appropriate event in public. But anyway, so this is a sort of 17th, 18th century style hilt, or a kind of interpretation of it. And you'll notice it is super short. Now, I understand some modern people would want a longer grip, but I wanted it as short as the original ones because for the purposes of videos, living history, interpretation, learning, understanding, I want something to be as close to the original, functionally anyway, as possible. And that means learning to understand how these short grips are gripped and worked and why they were that short is a really interesting thing. And we'll look at that in a future video. I'll do a special dedicated video on dirks in the future. But absolutely lovely work again by Ethan. And again, I just show you that. Look, that knotwork is absolutely lovely. Really, really like it. So obviously I'll stick a link down below to Ravensbeak Forge because I owe Ethan a lot. He sent me a lot of stuff over the years. And as I say, not only just one final one, nice little dirk, if you want a dirk to stick in the top of your sock. And he is also really good at sharpening stuff as well. His stuff's really sharp. Not only has he sent me a lot of really cool stuff over the years, which is nice to own, but it has provided me with a lot of material for videos for you guys. So whether you buy anything from Ethan in the future, from Ravensbeak Forge or not, I hope that you'll just drop a thank you to Ravensbeak Forge down in the comments. It would mean a lot to me because these things are really useful for videos and me expanding my horizons into other topics than just medieval swords. And I'm sure they'll continue to be on my walls and used in many future videos for years and years and years to come. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how Ethan grows as a smith and what he's making. And you know, I love what he's doing. And he's a young guy, getting better and better all the time, and look at that, Awesome stuff. Anyway, thanks a lot to Ethan at Ravenspeak Forge. Thanks a lot to you for watching. I have been Matt Easton. I will of course continue to be, and I hope to see you back on the channel really soon. Cheers folks.